bowing to pressure from Nancy Pelosi, President Biden bit the bullet and has extended that eviction ban. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily even Nancy Pelosi. I'll let you kind of figure out why this happened here in a second. I don't want to lead the witness. I will say bowing to pressure because he didn't think he could do this, or maybe he didn't want to do it. I mean, I'll leave that for you to decide. I mean, remember just a few days ago when the White House Economic Counsel, Brian Deasy, we showed you that clip on Sunday from Sunday's show, right, where he basically said, hey, you know what? We just want states to spend that money on rental assistance, but we're done. Our hands are tied. We've already been out there helping. We've already done our job.
I kind of feel like that's a cop-out because if I were the president of the United States and I thought that something wasn't right, I would ask everyone I could how to make it happen. Like, can I do this or not? Like, you have to at some level know he didn't want this. Otherwise, he would have.
Findings of their
yeah, exactly.
He's the president.
Well, that's the thing. It's like you have an opportunity right now to be out in front of people leading on this issue for the last month. This was not a surprise, right? This was not a surprise. We knew that this was coming, and we couldn't do anything about it. I'll let you decide on that. I'm going to show you the facts here. You decide.
Well, and really quick, all he would have to do is he would have to say, I'm going to have a press conference, and then he'd just pressure whoever's fault he felt it was to get it done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, we same thing we talked about with the $15 an hour minimum wage, right? If he really, really wanted it, didn't just pay lip service to it, he would have led on that issue. He would have been at the podium talking about the need for $15 an hour minimum wage. The same thing is true on Amazon. He could have flown down to Alabama and stood with those union workers at Amazon and told them, like, here's what the power you get by unionizing, standing up to big business. He paid lip service to it, but didn't get to the podium. He didn't do more than that. And he could have done that. He also could have done that on that Senate parliamentarian issue back when the Senate basically said you can't pass a state, or you can't use the reconciliation process to pass $15 an hour minimum wage, et cetera. Like, he could have stood up to that and said, you know what, we're going to go around the Senate parliamentarian. I'm a leader. Just to give you some frame of reference on where things are right now as far as stocks for apartment companies. Stocks for apartment companies are up 42% right now. Big Wall Street landlords absolutely do not want their Democratic friends to extend this moratorium. You can absolutely be sure of that. Landlords have done absolutely brilliantly during this pandemic and during the eviction moratorium. I mean, raking in profit, these big companies, and yet they don't want an eviction moratorium. They can't handle it. But I wanted to bring you a little bit more about backstory of how the White House completely reversed its position from we can't issue a new eviction moratorium to suddenly we're going to issue a new eviction moratorium, as if this was our idea all along. So the first big item is that there was this enormous pressure, and we have to give a round of applause, I think, absolutely 100% to Cori Bush. Cori Bush, who basically was at the White House, on the Capitol steps, camped out on the Capitol steps. On Friday night, she writes, I came to the Capitol with my chair. She was there for 5 days. I refused to accept that Congress would leave for vacation while 11 million people faced eviction. For 5 days, we've been out here, demanding that our government acts to save lives. Today, our movement moved mountains. Yes, Cori. Thank you. Civil disobedience, nonviolent, camped out for 5 days with people who, she, by the way, and it really helps, that she has experienced homelessness in her life. So she understands how defeating homelessness can be for Americans. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was also there, Mondaire Jones as well, in this public pressure campaign. Go ahead, sorry.
Well, that's fine. I was just going to say, remember yesterday we were talking, if these Congress people would just do things like this, like stand in, and there's somebody who gets a lot of, they're popular on Twitter, they get a lot of media attention. This is a way that they can do stuff. And it's they just have to sit there and make it a public thing that they're not going to bow down to the pressure.
Yeah. I mean, we already saw it unfolding as Brooke Jones says here, Cori Bush is a godsend. Thank you, Brooke, for saying that. I agree. I mean, this is, you stand up to people, right? This is what it looks like. You stand up to Washington. You stand up. Do you want, Americans sleeping on the streets because we have an opportunity to do something? We have an opportunity to stand up to this. Now, I should point out that, the way that the Hill frames it, I think is absolutely right. Biden buys time with new eviction ban. So the issue here is that it allows them to put this eviction ban in place while the courts then have to end up dealing with it. And that's what they should have done all along.
I have a question though. Like the guy that, like all the people that we just saw get evicted right after this happened, do they get to go back in the homes that they were just evicted from? Or, you know what I mean? Like those people moved all those people's furniture out and just left them there high and dry. Can they get back in now?
Well, first of all, I will push back on this idea that here's the issue. Okay, so let's break that down. It's a good question. You know, an eviction process takes weeks, 2 weeks at most at minimum in Texas. Okay, that's the state that's like probably moves the quickest with evictions. If you're trying to get an eviction in any other state, let's take New Jersey for example, it can take a very long time. And you have to hire a lawyer to do it. There's a whole process involved in getting this eviction process. So if on Saturday the eviction moratorium ends, no one's being evicted in 2 days. You know what I mean? Like it's not happening.
So that process had already started, is what you're saying.
That process had already started and was for some other reason. It could have been that, yes, they lied. The landlord lied to the judge that this is the reason I'm evicting this person is because of loud noise or some other garbage, right? That's we've heard that story before.
But
even
could they
though
have?
It was pandemic related. You know, they lost their job, but no, I'm going to blame it on noise.
Yeah, and that's what the guy said. He lost his job, and that's why he wasn't paying rent. But could they not have started the process knowing that the moratorium ended that day? Like, could he have not started the process 2 weeks early, saying, "We're going to start the process now to get him out when that ends"?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, and every state is different. You know, and certain states had their own extensions, but the federal version had run out on July 31st. So really, I guess depends on when that process was started and if the sheriff then was enforcing this on the day that they would have had to have timed it perfectly. I just find it hard to believe that a Saturday and Sunday when the courts aren't open, and now it's Wednesday. Yeah, something could have happened on Monday and Tuesday for sure. Like I'm not saying that hasn't happened. I'm just saying the timeline is a little weird on that, and it takes a long time to go through an eviction process. So, I'm not quite sure if these people that we're seeing being evicted right now it's suddenly happening overnight. These courts are backed up too. I think that it's a long process.
And just another question, because I'm not really sure. Like, so when the money is sent out to federal government to the states, do the states divvy it out to the landlords or to the tenant? Like, how does that work? Like, it's going to the landlords to cover people's rent, and then they're say, okay, I'm going to cover this person for 3 months, this person for like, how do they disperse that money to know who they're helping and all of that? Like, who gets it?
The landlord has to go to the state and get this disbursement. They have to show that, hey, my tenant, here's the lease, has not been paying rent. Here is proof that they have not been paying rent. And then they have to get like papers signed also by I think the tenant. It's a process. But the states have been terrible in doling out this rental assistance money. So they've been awful at it. And, some of these governors have just not wanted to do it. And there's been obviously pressure from Wall Street to not do it. They'd rather have these tenants thrown out. They can clean the house out. They can sell the property. They can sell it to these big hedge funds. They can install new tenants, raise the rents. Rents are going up 25%. They're making bank. So they want these tenants out of there. They don't want the money. People aren't taking this money. And by the way, a lot of people don't even know how to get the money, and the states haven't made it easy at all to get the money. New Jersey, for instance, is a perfect example. Perfect example. I've heard nightmares from people trying to get access to this rental assistance in some of these different states. And again,
I'm going to hammer on, if they would have just done a UBI from the beginning of this pandemic, we probably wouldn't be in this situation. If they act like people don't want to pay their rent. They act like it's people's fault that they lost their jobs during a pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, look at Canada, $2,000 a month. So, but of course, the right wing talking points on this is that that's just going to keep you from working. It's we can't afford that. We can't give out assistance to people like that. Our economy is turning around. Look at these stock prices. The stock market is doing great.
Well, and how many people are like, when does the eviction moratorium end in Canada? Like, when are they going to be facing eviction? Just out of curiosity.
They don't have an eviction issue.
Wait, so they're not throwing their citizens out into the streets right now because and they're getting money? Wow.
No. Imagine trying to do this in Europe. You are not going to, it's not going to happen.
Oh,
you
no.
are not going to evict somebody in Europe.
They would have manure. The farmers would come in with their tractors with cow manure and spread it all over your building, all over you. Like, they don't take that stuff.
No, they don't. And, it's interesting to see some of the back and forth here and the details here. You had Cory Bush there on the steps, camped out. And that really put a lot of pressure on President Biden to do this. And according to reports, this was key. This was absolutely key with her being there for pushing on Biden. So all you had this huge anger from the left. So doing nothing was not an option. And then behind the scenes, as Jeff Stein reports for the Washington Post, Speaker Pelosi phoned President Biden in recent days and urged him to reverse course and extend the eviction ban. Pelosi also pressed Steve Ricchetti and Chief of Staff Ron Klain on phone calls. Pelosi was adamant that executive action was the only path to change here. But it was interesting because she was tweeting about this, right? She says, the CDC has the power to extend the eviction moratorium as they double down on masks. They extend the moratorium in light of the Delta variant. Why wouldn't they? She was basically trying to say that they have the power to do this. So this new moratorium lasts until October 3rd, despite possible legal challenges from landlords.
How in the world does the CDC have that power?
Well, that's the thing.
When was power granted to them for this?
They don't have this power. This is the whole point. So, Pelosi here, she says she tweets on this on August 1st, right? By the way, August 1st. So the eviction moratorium ended on the 31st, July 31st. Like, you could have done something in Congress well before this time. And she knows it. And she knows that the big Democratic money guys, the real estate guys on Wall Street, didn't want this extension, right? So now she's saying, well, the CDC, it's in your court. You could do something about this, right? So she apparently engaged in a frantic round of phone calls and lobbying President Biden on this at the last minute. And apparently during one conversation with Pelosi, Biden said that his legal advisors were warning him that he couldn't extend the moratorium because of that June 29th Supreme Court ruling, which we covered here on the show. You remember the business-friendly Supreme Court. They let the moratorium stand, but then Justice Brett Kavanaugh said that the CDC had exceeded its existing statutory authority and that Congress must act to extend the ban. So the CDC doesn't have the power, and Pelosi knows that the CDC doesn't have the authority, but she's pretending that she does. She's pretending that they do. All she needed to do was go right to the White House's website. It's plain as day. Look at this, right on the whitehouse.gov website. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court has made clear that this option is no longer available. The CDC cannot extend the eviction moratorium. In June, when the CDC extended the eviction moratorium until July 31st, the Supreme Court's ruling stated that clear and specific congressional authorization would be necessary for the CDC to extend the moratorium past July 31st.
I mean, it is a good way for Pelosi to be like, oh, I'm sorry, donors. Those doggone CDC people passed it. We didn't.
Yeah,
So
you
can still donate to us.
We didn't bring anything up in Congress. I didn't bring it to the floor of Congress to make this moratorium. Like, I didn't create a law. Instead, I went on vacation.
And I didn't tweet it until after it was over.
Yeah, and I waited till August 1st for this tweet to go out, guys. So you can still donate money to us, right? It's August 1st. CDC, you have the power to do this. I'll show some teeth here. So when Biden decided to make his announcement on Tuesday night, on the new moratorium, the first person he called was Pelosi, who just finished a caucus call. And so she said in a statement she released, "Today is a day of extraordinary relief," she says in her statement. "Thanks to the leadership of President Biden, the imminent fear of eviction and being put out on the streets has been lifted for countless families across America. Help is here," she writes. Help is here, she writes.
So I guess now the CDC are the bad guys, so now we shouldn't believe anything they say?
I guess. Here's Kamala Coble. Can you take the show for a second? Sorry, I got to get this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. So, yeah, can you imagine the phone call with Biden and Pelosi? She's probably just sitting there eating ice cream. These people, it's so funny because these people don't care, Like, they knew this was coming. For how long? How long did they know this was coming? They knew, let's say at the very least, they knew a month in advance. It was way before that, but let's say it was just a month. And they wait until it's actually done And who knows how many people have already been kicked out of their homes because of this. Like that one day or whatever, or however many days it was. So that was passed. This is the 4th. So in those 3 days, I wonder how many people are out. You know what I mean? And what's going to happen to those people? Can they go, well, you kicked me out. I'm going to go back and try to get in my house now. There was a lady that literally moved into her car that day. So what happens to her now?
Well, that's a great point. I'm sorry, I was listening from afar. I had to get a package for the studio here that was just arriving right in the middle of the show, and no one's home. No one's home here at the studio to grab it. So, but yeah, I mean, exactly. Like if you look at these people who did lose their homes, they're out now, they're homeless, and you have somebody like this person who Jeff Stein pointed out, Kamala Coble, 30, of Kansas City, spent 3 hours today in court after the landlord filed for eviction. Works full-time and was terrified of impact of eviction on her daughter, 12 years old. On the White House eviction ban, it's like finding a buoy in the middle of the ocean after kicking so long to stay above the waves. Thank you, Grover.
Get him, boy. One of those
there's a couple of things
come in handy right now.
That's true. The doorbell rings. But, so worrying about losing your home, you're spending 3 hours in eviction court, you can't work, you're and working full time. Like, so behind on her payments because of the pandemic, goes back to work, is working full time now, but is still behind. I mean, this is where stimulus, right? This is where universal basic income, this is where something would have helped. So to make sure that this doesn't happen. So even with her having a full-time job, a daughter, and a home that she lives in facing eviction, she can't get caught up. Like, how is she going to get caught up the thousands of dollars that she's out now because her job was gone? That's what. And
facing. How many countries took care of their people during the entire pandemic? How many countries? Like if you look at the number of countries that completely, like, at least paid like 50, 80%, even if they would have given us 50, 60% of our wages during this, we could have been fine. Like people don't understand how good the economy was doing when this first happened and we got those first checks and what was it, $600 a week in unemployment? Mm-hmm. Like, people were paying their bills, everything was going well. And that was not a good litmus test for you to understand that that's all it would have been if you would have just done a UBI and taken care of us like every other country did.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's one of those things where Grover, sorry. I want to pretend. No, I don't want to pretend. I would, you'd like to sit back and say, wow, they really, our government has always looked out for us, right? We pay into a system, we're the greatest country in the world. They always support us. And sure, wouldn't it be great for other countries to look up to America because they always take care of their people, right? They always support their people. They have great health care. They have, during a pandemic, America is the leader in the world. What did they do? They were able to provide for their people. Instead, Congress defers to Wall Street and corporate interests and big money, and now these people are unable to get caught up, and we're kicking the can down the street. I mean, I think this sums it up. Biden buys time. That's really all it is. Buys time.
Can you remember a time in history where there was a crisis that was affecting us, that they helped us and not the donors, not the big businesses? I mean, look at the 2008 bailouts when 5 million people or so lost their homes or something like that. And who'd they bail out? They bailed out the businesses. They bailed out Wall Street. Right. And you look at something like Iceland, where they jailed the bankers. They bailed out the people because they had done the same thing. They had a housing crisis. And they completely recovered right away. We're still technically not fully recovered from that time.
No.
But those businesses that they saved, that were making risky investments, they helped them, but we got screwed. So I'd like to know, when was the last time there was a crisis that affected us, that they actually helped us and not Wall Street?
It's a good question. I mean, hey, what about Obamacare, right? Has nothing to do with propping up prescription drug companies and Wall Street, right? And insurance companies like that. That totally helps people, right? No.
Right. No, that wasn't. They sure sold it as if it did.
I got one. The war in Iraq, right? Like Iraq is coming for us, so we got to go in there because they had these weapons of mass destruction, and we got to protect ourselves.
Nope. Somebody said the last time was the Green New. Wait, the New Deal President Roosevelt.
Okay. The New Deal. Yeah. I was probably the New Deal. I mean, maybe Lyndon Johnson passing voting rights legislation, civil rights legislation. Maybe that. Have to go back to the 1960s though, right?
But that's like so if you have that history, okay, you've got that history. Why do we keep thinking they're going to help us now? Why do we sit here and argue about this and get on two sides of an issue and fight ourselves this hard, saying, "Oh no, they're Democrats, they're going to help us," and the Republicans people are like, "Oh no, it's socialism, it's socialism." They've got us fighting each other like worse than we've ever fought each other before, thinking that we're going to get something from either side, and they've never helped us. So when does that become the definition of insanity? Voting these people in and thinking they're going to be the one to help us. Biden's going to be the one to help us. This person's going to be the one to help us, and they never do.
Yeah. I mean, we got a story coming up here on Nina Turner. There was an opportunity. We'll get to that story. Someone who actually tells the truth and actually cares and actually could have made a difference. We'll get to that story. But big money gets in the way once again. Big money interests. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. You can also become a channel member by going to morninginvest.com/join, where you can stick it to the mainstream media and support independent journalism. We're able to bring you the stories that you won't see on any of the major billionaire-backed networks. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time, everyone.